Hello and welcome to WION Live Broadcast from Washington, D.C. I'm Nick Harper and here are the headlines. Russian President Vladimir Putin blasts attempts to create a unipolar world and praises China's balanced approach to Ukraine as he meets Chinese President Xi Jinping in Uzbekistan. Azerbaijan claims that 71 of its troops died in border clashes with Armenia over the last 2 days, in the worst fighting since 2020, while Armenia said 105 of its troops were killed. Amsterdam's Schiphol Airport Chief Executive Dick Benschop announces that he's stepping down following months of continual chaos at one of Europe's largest transport hubs. Bankrupt Sri Lanka's economy shrinks 8.4% year-on-year in the second quarter as the island nation suffers through its financial crash. Unprecedented floods that submerged huge swaths of Pakistan kill nearly 1,500 people, as authorities say hundreds of thousands are still sleeping in the open after the disaster. Well, we're going to start with some breaking news this morning. Roger Federer, the former #1 tennis world champion, has just announced his retirement. He's posted a message on social media, a video where he speaks for about 4 minutes or so, saying that at the age of 41, having played 1,500 matches over the last 24 years of his career, he is now ready to take a break. He says that his body has been giving him a very clear message recently. He said that it has limits to his capacity and therefore he is choosing now as the moment to step down. Well, for more on this, we can go to WION's sports editor, Jigvi Singh Dio, who's joining us live from the newsroom. Some incredible breaking news, this one. What does this mean for the tennis world, and what has Roger Federer had to say so far about his retirement?
Well, for the tennis world, it comes as a huge shock because all the indications coming from Federer and his team was that he was willing to give it one more try. You know, those multiple knee surgeries that had happened, and he kept posting messages on social media saying that he was trying to push himself for one last hurrah, but clearly that hasn't happened. So we're going to remember Roger Federer as perhaps one of the greatest of all time, if not the greatest. That debate is out, especially with Rafael Nadal and Novak Djokovic in the mix as well. But for the world of tennis, this is going to come as a huge shock because I think everyone expected Serena Williams' retirement at the US Open to be sort of the last goodbye for this year. And with Federer announcing the Laver Cup and the fact that this is a tournament very dear to him, this was clearly the start of what was going to be another grand Federer comeback. But finally, he's just put out that statement, as you mentioned, a 4-minute video when he details the reasons. And he's clearly said that at 41, it's not getting easier for him. So it's going to be a huge shock, and it's going to be a huge shock not just in sport, but sort of also not just in tennis, but also across sport, because Roger Federer, along with Tiger Woods and Serena Williams, was perhaps one of those athletes who transcended their sport. And that's why it's sort of got to resonate with every person somewhere around the world.
And you mentioned there Serena Williams, obviously two of the biggest tennis sports stars of recent years, now retiring from the sport. I mean, it certainly seems as if the tennis world is moving in a different direction. Does this mean that the next generation of sports stars will be able to rise to the fore with these two greats leaving the stage?
Well, we've already seen the start of that, in a sense, at this US Open with Carlos Alcaraz, 19-year-old, becoming world number one, winning his maiden Grand Slam title. Federer, if you in comparison, was what, 21, 22 when he won his first Grand Slam in 2003 at Wimbledon. So the change of guard has been going on for a while, but perhaps the likes of Daniil Medvedev, the likes of Alexander Zverev, the Tsitsipas's of the world, they've not been able to sort of grab hold of that number one ranking, and that's allowed the likes of Rafael Nadal and Novak Djokovic to seemingly keep on dominating the sport. Let's not forget, Djokovic last year went and was in the final of all the 4 Grand Slams. He won the first 3 Grand Slams of the year and lost to Medvedev at the US Open. Rafael Nadal was 2 sets to love down in the Australian Open final, came from nowhere to beat Medvedev and win what was then a record 21st Grand Slam title. He then went on and won the French Open, and then Djokovic came back and won Wimbledon for his 21st. So this rivalry between Federer, Djokovic and Nadal has elevated men's singles tennis to something really special. You know, to have three contenders for the greatest of all time tag playing in the same generation is what has made this truly special. I was actually looking at numbers ahead of this US Open, and since the start of 2017, so many different players, I think 14 different players had won women's singles Grand Slams. But in that same period, it was Federer, it was Djokovic, it was Nadal. Perhaps there was what? There was Andy Murray, there was Medvedev, very few compared to what had been going on in the women's draw. So for Federer to pull out right now just leaves Nadal and Djokovic there. We don't know how long those two are going to keep going, because age and their punishing styles of play is obviously going to take a toll, and they've also started to get through all these injuries, and Nadal has been on and off on the court. But let's first listen to what Federer had to say. It's a long post, and he's come out and said why he's moving on from tennis and why the Laver Cup next week is going to be the last time that we see Roger Federer on a tennis court as a competitor.
To my tennis family and beyond. Of all the gifts that tennis has given me over the years, the greatest, without a doubt, has been the people I've met along the way. My friends, my competitors, and most of all the fans who give the sport its life. Today, I want to share some news with all of you. As many of you know, the past 3 years have presented me with challenges in the form of injuries and surgeries. I've worked hard to return to full competitive form, but I also know my body's capacities and limits, and its message to me lately has been clear. I am 41 years old. I've played more than 1,500 matches over 24 years. Tennis has treated me more generously than I ever would have dreamt, and now I must recognize when it is time to end my competitive career. The Laver Cup next week in London will be my final ATP event. I will play more tennis in the future, of course, but just not in Grand Slams or on the tour. This is a bittersweet decision because I will miss everything the tour has given me, but at the same time, there is so much to celebrate. I consider myself one of the most fortunate people on earth. I was given a special talent to play tennis, and I did it at a level that I never imagined for much longer than I ever thought possible. I would like to especially thank my amazing wife Mirka, who has lived through every minute with me. She has warmed me up before finals, watched countless matches even while over 8 months pregnant, and has endured my goofy side on the road with my team for over 20 years. I also want to thank my 4 wonderful children for supporting me, always eager to explore new places and creating wonderful memories along the way.
So Roger Federer in that post detailing the reasons that have led to his retirement. He's going to be seen on court one final time at the Lever Cup, a tournament that he backed, a tournament that he sort of set up on the lines of the Ryder Cup in golf, where a team from Europe took on a team of international stars. Clearly, considering the talent that is on offer in Europe, they've always won this. And this one was being billed as the first time, or perhaps the last time, that Federer, Djokovic, Nadal and Andy Murray, the original big four of men's singles tennis, they would be seen together for the one final time.
WION's sports editor joining us live on the breaking news that Roger Federer is stepping down, announcing his retirement this morning on social media. Well, moving on now, Russian President Vladimir Putin held a bilateral meeting with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping in Uzbekistan. The meeting happened on the sidelines of the ongoing SCO summit in the ancient Silk Road city of Samarkand. During the high-stakes meeting, Putin thanked Xi for maintaining a balanced position on Ukraine. Note that China has not spoken against Russia's invasion of Ukraine since it was launched over 6 months ago, despite backlash from the West. Hinting at the United States, Putin said the recent attempts to create a unipolar world have acquired an ugly shape and are completely unacceptable. Putin also explicitly backed China over Taiwan, saying that Moscow firmly adheres to the One China policy. The Russian president instead condemned the US provocations in the Taiwan Strait. President Xi Jinping, on the other hand, said that China is willing to work with Russia as great powers.
Facing an ever-changing world, era and history, China is willing to make efforts with Russia to assume the role of great powers and play a guiding role to inject stability and positive energy into a world rocked by social turmoil.
Well, this is the second time that the two leaders have met this year. Their last meeting took place in Beijing in late January, on the sidelines of the Olympics, where Xi announced a no-limits Russia-China friendship. A lot, though, has changed geopolitically between these two meetings. Russia has launched an invasion of Ukraine, while China's relations with the West have deteriorated over Taiwan tensions. The two separate events have pushed the countries further from the West, but have brought them closer to one another. While the China-Russia bonhomie raised eyebrows across the Pacific, the biggest alarm is Iran's entry to the SCO. Russian President Putin held a bilateral with Iran's President Ibrahim Raisi, where he said the ties between the two countries are developing positively.
Relations between Russia and Iran are developing in all the vectors that have been formed in many previous years. We are in the final stage of working on a new major treaty between Russia and Iran, which will mark the developing of relations at the level of strategic partnership.
Since 2019, Iran, Russia and China have held 3 joint naval drills amid deepening ties. Tehran's expected inclusion is stoking fears of the SCO emerging as an anti-West grouping. The Kremlin, on the other hand, says the SCO does not seek to become an alternative to Western unions. WION's principal diplomatic correspondent, Siddhant Sibal, is joining us live from Samarkand. A big meeting, this one, Siddhant. What is India saying in terms of this meeting? Is there much reaction so far coming out of India?
Well, as of now, there is no reaction by India, and I do not think that there will be a reaction from India over a meeting between the Russian President Vladimir Putin and the Chinese President Xi Jinping. But of course, everyone is closely watching the outcomes of the meeting. We saw that when it comes to the meetings, the Russian President made all the right noises. He reaffirmed one China policy. He condemned or scolded the US when it comes to the Taiwan Strait crisis. But of course, this time the bonhomie, relatively many would say, was not that much as compared to the visit of the Russian President Vladimir Putin to Beijing in February. That's just before the invasion started. That could be because of how the entire international order has been against Moscow. Of course, it is led by West, and the West, of course, is keen on isolation and, of course, sanctioning Russian President Vladimir Putin. But for the Russian President Vladimir Putin, Samarkand is an occasion to tell to the West that he has friends. He's going to meet a lot of leaders. Today he has number of bilaterals. He met the Chinese president. He met the Pakistani Prime Minister, leaders from Central Asia. He's going to meet the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Friday, the leadership from Turkey as well. When it comes to India-Russia relationship, this is an old relationship essentially which has been time-tested, much celebrated, and of course while defense has been a key pillar of this relationship, we have seen energy becoming another key pillar of this relationship, with India importing discounted Russian energy since the conflict began. So lot of essentially permutations and combinations when it comes to President Putin's bilaterals, but everything keenly being watched in the West.
And also joining us on the broadcast is Susan Tarani, our US correspondent, joining us live from New York. Susan, I wanted to get your take on what this means for the West. Have we had reaction coming out of Washington in terms of this meeting taking place in Samarkand?
Right, really, Nick, indirect reactions. Obviously, the United States is watching this meeting, and so are G7 countries and those in Europe as well. You know, we did see John Kirby sort of indirectly reacting, warning, as the U.S. has, about how China should not be supporting Russia in the war against Ukraine. But I think that Xi Jinping in China understands that they really have a fine line to thread here. On the one hand, you know, while they do have that unending friendship that they declared months ago, and Russia really does want to show that it enjoys the full-fledged support of China. But Xi Jinping in China understand that if they go full-fledged supporting Russia, then they might face sanctions not only from the United States, other Western countries, but also a diplomatic blowback at a time when things are very sensitive between China and the West, and at a time when Xi himself is sort of walking this fine line and trying to run for a third term, which is very unconventional. So, you know, that's where things stand right now. While the West and the United States do heed those warnings, I think China and Xi himself also are considering, you know, to what extent, you know, to support Russia. But I think that in terms of the bigger SCO context, I think it's a win for you know, the countries that are involved.
Thank you, Susan. We're also being joined by Anas Malik, WION's Pakistan bureau chief. He is inside the SCO meeting. Let's turn to you, Anas. What are you hearing from this meeting?
Well, what we know that the state is all set for Uzbekistan to host this SCO meeting here in the Congress Hall where I am right now as we speak. And tomorrow there is a packed day. We see that the day starts off with the arrival of the leaders, then there's a family photo, and then the SCO formally kicks off. On the agenda is cooperation, precisely with regards to trade. The proposal that was agreed upon, the draft proposal that was agreed upon during the SCO foreign ministers meeting in Tashkent in July, and we were covering that about trade in local currencies, that is likely to be ratified during this meeting of the heads of states. It will be put forward. Whether there are any objections or not, that would be very, very keenly watched out. Climate change is on the agenda as well. Then regional cooperation and regional security is definitely on the agenda. Nick?
Joining us, that was Anas Malik, WION's bureau chief, joining us live from Samarkand there at the SCO meeting. The President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, is in Kiev. It's a third visit since Russia launched its invasion. The focus of this visit is on the integration of Ukraine into the EU market. Von der Leyen announced her trip during the EU plenary session on Wednesday.
So pleased to see what I've been yesterday. Thank you so much. More to come today. Good to see you. How are you?
She met with Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky and was honoured with the award of the first class of the Order of Yaroslav the Wise. Tweeting on her arrival, von der Leyen said, "So much has changed. Ukraine is now a European Union candidate." Ukraine applied for EU membership after the war began, and it was granted a candidate status in under 4 months. While in Kiev, von der Leyen is expected to discuss the integration of Ukraine into the EU's single market, allowing free movement of goods, capital, services and people. Well, our correspondent Ross Collins joining us live from Paris for more on this. Ross, what's von der Leyen hoping to be getting out of this visit?
Yeah, Nick, this is her third visit to Ukraine since the start of the war, and a symbolic visit coming the day after she hosted Olena Zelenska, the First Lady of Ukraine, at the European Parliament building, where von der Leyen gave her State of the European Union speech. That was a speech covered in the symbolism of Ukraine. Von der Leyen herself was wearing a blue top and a yellow jacket. Several other members of the European Parliament wearing a combination of blue and yellow, the colours of Ukraine, and she reiterated that European support for Ukraine in her speech. She made it very clear that she said courage has a name, and that name is Ukraine. Courage has a face, she said, and that's the face of all the men and women standing up to Russian aggression. And during the speech she confirmed she would be going to Kiev very soon. We know that it took place just 24 hours later today. On Thursday she has been in Ukraine for meetings with the First Lady's, meeting with the First Lady's husband, Volodymyr Zelensky, and also meeting with the Prime Minister, Denis Shmyhal, for technical talks about the single market and about the long roadmap for Ukraine to get to European Union membership some years in the future. But another demonstration that she wants to show that there were words yesterday, but it's actions today, that when the European Parliament and European Commission politicians do speak, they can also back it up with actions in her trip to Ukraine.
Ross Cullen joining us live from Paris. Thank you very much for your time. Well, next today, Apple users are enjoying the new releases, be it the new iPhone 14 or the latest iOS 16 software. But there's something perhaps more important that Apple users should know about. The average price of in-app purchases on the iOS App Store has increased 40% year on year. When it comes to the Google Play Store, the increase in price has been a mere 9% during the same time frame. This has been reported by app intelligence firm Apptopia. Look at this graph and perhaps you'll get a better picture. What has led to such a sudden jump in prices? Well, experts say inflation cannot be the reason, because the increases kicked in before inflation began to hit the economy hard in 2022. It's believed that the sudden jump in prices happened during and due to privacy changes at Apple. Remember last year, Apple introduced its new privacy-focused feature, the App Tracking Transparency feature. Well, what does it do? It allows users to choose whether an app can track their activity for ads and share their information with data brokers. So, as one would expect, many iPhone users have started to choose not to be tracked by apps. It may seem insignificant, but this single move by Apple has impacted significantly the ad business. As a result, Apple's app tracking transparency feature made it more costly to acquire new users. So it appears that app publishers may have decided to revise the pricing model. But if you're thinking these percentage increases seem very high, you just need to remember that in terms of absolute numbers, these price increases are perhaps not all that much. For example, the Metronome Beats BPM Counter app increased its Metronome Beats Pro in-app purchase from $399 to $499, a jump of 25%. In another example, Pink Fong Baby Shark increased its in-app purchase to remove ads by 100%. Its move comes from $199 to $399 in total. Well, that's all we have time for today on this broadcast. Thanks very much for joining us. I'm Nick Harper in Washington, D.C. We'll be back again, same time tomorrow.
There are many other